using the camera in Harmony can give us a way to simplify scene animation as well as create rich visual depth within our scene. So right now I have a project that has a number of layers. It has a previous character that we've worked on a different project, and then I have, if we just turn everything off, so there's a sky layer on here, and a ground plane, and a cloud, and a cloud, and a cloud, a house, a tree, another tree, a hill, and another hill. So we have a bunch of different layers here. Now, when we start working here, it's useful to understand the spatial relationship of our layers. And to do that, what we want to do, I'm just going to shrink that down so I can make some of my other windows a little bit bigger. Now, one thing when we're working here, if I click on the arrow, it minimizes that down there so I can now see all of this. So if you haven't discovered that accidentally, now you know that's how those arrows work. Or if I can want to make that one, so it kind of collapses one window into another to maximize its viewing. So looking up here, I have the plus, and when I click on the plus, I'll see I have other windows that I can bring up. And one of the ones I want to bring up over here is my top view. And I'm going to make my top view fill the whole thing. So now I can see all of my layers. And if I click on a layer, we can see where that layer exists. So I can see my main viewing area, and I can even crop it out. So that's what my scene looks like. But everything is on this one plane. Now this plane is in relation to the fixed camera for the scene. So if I don't add a camera element, which is what we're going to do here, this is where everything exists in relation to the camera that is default for my scene. Now, if I want to add a camera, the best thing for doing that is to make sure that I have nothing selected. So we're going to click off. We don't want anything selected. So if I choose camera, we can see, okay, where did that camera go? And the camera always goes at the bottom. Now it is possible you can have more than one camera for a scene, and then you can render out a series of frames based on that camera. And the cameras do have properties associated with them. So we can take a look at what we have here on the camera, and big one is our field of view for the camera. This is our standard field of view that we're working with. Now I can adjust that if I see fit. But a camera isn't animatable unless we add a peg to it. So with the camera layer selected, I can click on the add peg button, and that now adds a peg to the camera. Now I can close that out, and now with that I can animate the camera. So I can click on the first frame for that peg, add in a keyframe. I can go over 10 frames. I can add another keyframe, and now I can move this. But we won't see much happen because, well, our layers haven't been extended out. So I'm going to extend everything out. Now, it doesn't matter for the camera itself because the camera is just an object. It doesn't have exposure like everything else. So now I've extended it out. I'll hit F5 on the keyboard to extend those layers. Now that I have done that, what I can do is grab my animation tool or transform tool, and I can animate the camera. But I personally find that it's a little bit easier to use the advanced animation tools like the translate tool, rotate tool, and we'll be taking a look at scale, but even more importantly, maintain size and see how that impacts what we're doing. We're not going to worry about And skew, you can use spline offset, we're not going to worry about right now. And we're going to just focus on scale, rotation, translation, and maintain size. Those are the 4 we'll be looking at here. So making sure that my camera peg is the selected object. Now if I move this, we can see how the scene, now I'm pushing the camera towards this plane. This plane is considered 0. So if we move our layers in our Z space, this is at 0. Everything in front of that plane would be a positive number. Everything beyond that plane will have a B associated with it or a back number. Now if I move this side to side, so if I move it to the right, we can see our scene moves left. But think about this in terms of a real camera. So when my scene is this big, if I'm moving it around, if I move the camera in the scene, move it to the right, we're effectively panning the scene, so the scene moves left as we pan to the right. Now if I go into my camera view here, I can see if I drag up, it goes down, so we can see how this movement happens, and I can move around like this. Now if I use the rotate tool, we can see how the scene rotates in relation to our camera. So there's a lot going on here, but we don't have a lot of anything really cool yet because our scene is still flat. Everything is in one picture plane. So I'm going to ditch that keyframe, so we're back. And now what I want to do is add another view, and that view I'm going to add here. And the view that I'm going to add is my perspective view. So while I chose a top-down view, there are times where you will want to then use the side view as an option. So instead of top, you might want the side view. So you could choose side view here, and now we can see the side view. But the one that I'm more interested in right now is going to be my perspective view. Now, the perspective view is kind of interesting. So if I hold down Command and Option or Control Alt on Windows, I can turn my view so we can get a sense of this is what my scene looks like in perspective. Now this view here is just for looking at, we're not animating our scene, so we didn't just animate our scene to turn the angle. We can certainly do that transform, but that's not what we just did now. But this gives us a view. Now I want my sky to be really big, so that when I am animating my scene, and you can navigate around through here, move it by holding down spacebar, it gives you the hand, and then you can adjust your view. So I'm going to take the sky, so I can just click on it here in the little thumbnails, which is, I think, a little bit easier than clicking on it and trying to find that layer when we have all kinds of layers that we're working with. And I want to push the sky back. Now if I use translate, with the sky active, and now move it. Well, let's try again. Actually, I'm going to go back to frame 1 because I want to set all of this on the first frame. So with the sky active, oh, and I forgot, to reposition all of these objects, we do need to add pegs onto these objects to allow us to animate their properties. So if I shift select all of my layers, I can just simply click on the add peg icon. That adds a peg to each one of my layers, and now we're good. So now I can click on sky layer. Now one thing I will want to do is I will want to make sure I have peg selection mode active on this. So if we go back to our camera view, and there, now it's selected. So now anything else, so now it's properly selected. The sky is selected. If I look in the top view, I now have access to that tool. But now if I drag it back, we can see that my sky got really small. So that's problematic, which here we'll just solo the sky layer. There we go. So I can see how it's shrinking. But I want to push my sky back without it shrinking. So I want it to maintain its size while it goes back in space. And the way that we can do that is with the maintain size tool. So this will now keep it large as I push it back. So we can see now it's effectively scaling it up as I push it way back in space. Now I can zoom out. All right, so now it's way back in space. If I want to see kind of more detail on that, I can right click here and I can choose coordinate, and now I can see the coordinates, and it's now at 0.633b. It's behind the picture plane. Okay, so now if I go and choose, well, let's unsolo that, and I can go find the ground layer. So now I have the ground layer selected. I'm going to do the same thing with the ground layer so that I will push it back using maintain size and get that close to the sky, because I really don't want anything to go beyond those. Now, what we're going to do is just kind of keep working. So now with this, I'm gonna, I don't want to use maintain size anymore. Now I want to actually push a cloud back, and now I'll push another cloud back, and we'll push the third cloud back. And to see what's happening with these clouds, and well, why not? We'll just push kind of everything back in the scene. We're creating some spatial relationships between these objects, and now we might end up moving them a little bit more left and right, but the first order business is to get them existing in some type of space. Now I could let that one stay in front. What I might do is now pull that down a little bit, and this is where having more than one view open at a time is quite useful. So now if I start to zoom in on my scene, or we'll go to, so it fills the space, I can close it out, I can see there is my scene. So I may want to transform those hills a little bit more, adjust them and their spatial relationships. So we have these three hills, we have that occurring there. Now what can be quite fun is if I go and grab my camera, and if we start to take the camera, so I can move it around, we can see that the objects exist in some version of parallax. I think I want to adjust the positions of my clouds a little bit, maybe put them up in the sky. So we'll put the cloud a little higher, put another cloud up, put another cloud up, so that we have these different objects occurring. So now, so if I go back to my perspective view and zoom out a little bit, we can see what has been created. Again, Command Option allows us to see. So we may want to tighten up our spacing here a little bit. We can see the ground plane, we can see the objects as they are existing in 3Ds. But this isn't a camera animation, this just gives us a visualization. What we care about is using the camera animation, because now if we go back to the camera and we're at frame 1, at frame 10, I can just simply take the camera. Oh no, that I grabbed the wrong layer. I want the camera's peg, and now If I add in a keyframe, we can fly it in, we can go over the hills. Right there, now we can see how we're jumping. Now, one thing to notice on the keyframes is that these are stop motion keyframes, so there's no interpolation or tweening happening between those. And that is once again because under preferences I have it set up stop motion keyframes. Now this is a time where I'm going to turn it off so I get motion keyframes. Also remember, we always want focus on mouse enter selected. It makes your life much easier. And I can now take this keyframe and just simply clicking up here, it becomes a motion keyframe. I'll click on this keyframe, make it a motion keyframe, so the next animation I do will get movement happening with it. So now if I go over, let's just randomly say another 10 frames, you can see how we're creating this parallax within our scene. And we can zoom and slide over. Now I'm going to click on keyframe so I get a full keyframe right there. And now what I want to do this time is I'm going to push back over towards this tree. And as I do that, I am going to rotate the camera a little bit. So we can see how we get that little bit of rotation with the camera. And now I'm going to go over 4 frames, and then this time I am going to rotate it mostly back. So we can see how we rotate and then settle it back down. Now if I want, we can also in our coordinates we can see that I wasn't able to quite manually grab it. We went from -9, we only got back to -2, so if I just go to 0 here, that does square it back up. So it can be useful to use your coordinate system when you are animating through your scene. And now I'm going to push the camera towards this tree, and right as we're getting really close, insert a keyframe, go over a couple frames, so we fly into it. Now I can just push in forward. Oh, it's a little jumpy. And now I've pushed in onto my scene. So we can rotate, we can translate, but it's also possible while we're doing this, we do have an option. If I double click on the peg layer, not on the name, but on the peg layer, we will see there's an option to enable 3D. And if I do that, now I'll close out of here. Now, when I grab the rotate tool, it is possible that we can start to rotate our layer in 3D. So if we switch to the rotate tool, we'll see we have an option to rotate on the y-axis, the x-axis, and the z-axis. The z-axis is what we've been rotating on, so our standard rotate like that. But if we rotate on the x-axis, we can see some interesting things starting to happen. If we rotate on the y, so we can really start to get some interesting visual effects happening. But if we rotate things too far, it's giving us that same view that we almost have in the perspective view, where we lose track of what the scene really is as we are looking at now. If I zoom out a little bit more, it'll be more apparent what's happening when we are rotating. So we can see how we're really getting that sense of odd rotation happening to our scene. So it can be, if you do it a little bit, it can be okay, but if you do too much of this, you're going to get some really weird stuff happening. And now when I get back to this scene, what I might want to do is to set all my rotations. This is going to be the easiest way to clear it. Now I'm back to, so I'm not all completely cockeyed as part of it, and I've squared things back up. So this is with motion tweening going on, so it gives us that interpolation. But if we wanted to, when we're at a frame, from here, I'm going to add in a keyframe, turn it to a stop motion. We can effectively do a camera jump. So now let's see that next frame. So if I wanted to go from here and suddenly I'm looking at that tree without tweening to it, I can just say stop motion. Boom, it jumps. So we can use this as a way to animate the camera around the scene. That's one thing that we can do with it. But there's also some other options available to us. So I'm going to just clear all these keyframes. We're now back to our starting frame. I'm going to turn back on my character. Let's figure out where that character is. Now that character, I believe, still needs a master peg. I can't remember if he has one or not. So let's jump into node view and see what is going on. So if we go into the dude here, okay. All right, so it looks like everything so the dude is enabled, but everything inside the dude has been disabled. Now I can make everything active or disable it by clicking these buttons, the check mark and X, and that's also shortcut A, shortcut D. So I hit select all and then shortcut A, so that press the letter A, and now we can see our character is active again. All right, so let's go back into our view that we have here. Our character is currently sitting between hill 1 and hill 2. Here's all of the character's layers. We can see there's the different layers that are part of that character. So I hit B a bunch of times until I was at the topmost peg for that character. And now if I'm just going to add a keyframe, and let's push that character. We're going to go stand the character over in front of Grandma's house here. So I can just grab my translate tool, put the character, and now let's try. All right, I don't think it's grabbing quite the right part, so let's see. Now we have the master peg. Okay, we don't want it to select the group. I hit B one too many times. So now if I push the character back, I don't remember. I'm guessing it's tree, and there's Grandma's house right there. So now let's go back to the camera right here, and I'm going to just start my scene pushed in. So, all right, character's a little bit big, so we'll modify the dude out a little bit here just to do a little bit of scale. So again, I can grab the scale tool, hold down shift, keeps it proportional, and then we'll want to adjust the position of the character in relation to grandma's house here. Don't want him to go inside. So standing on the front step. All right, so he's standing on the front step there, chilling, having a good day. Looks like we might want to scale him down just a wee bit more. So he's now proportional to the house, so we can see there he's sitting on that front step. With the camera active right here, now what I could do is I could simply push in on the character, where I will then grab my translate tool, move tool, and now we can see how we're moving in on the character. We'll keep the character in frame. Now notice how we're getting this nice parallax, and this is part of what's really nice. You don't have to move individual parts of your character or move all the different background layer pieces once you use a unified camera and push your layers into Z-space. So now we zoomed in on the character here. Let's say maybe the character is going to talk for a while, and then I want to really punch in on the character's face. So maybe we'll give it 10 frames, and this time I really want to put the character. So now we're at a medium shot, so we went from a long shot to a medium shot. But what if I don't want that to animate? Maybe I want it just to cut to that. Well, I can do that by changing it from a motion to a stop motion keyframe. So that now holds on this position, and it's now zoomed in. And maybe I'll go a few more frames. And well, what I'm going to do, I know I want it to be a stop motion, so I'll say stop motion, the straight line. I'm going to go over 5 frames, and let's push in tighter. And now let's go over 5 more frames. And I'm going to, well, don't push in quite that far, but now we'll push in. Now I don't want it to do motion, so we can see we zoomed in, and now we'll do 20 frames and slowly pull back out. Now we can see that's motion. Now if I play my scene, we'll see the scene. So it's going kind of quick because I'm trying to keep the timeline on frame here, so we'll just slow it down. So you can see how we're able to animate these different types of camera movements. So I can do a cut. So if I had 2 characters in the scene, I could go from one character to the next, and I could animate between those 2 characters. So the camera could be focused on one, then it could focus on the next character. So it could very easily move and animate the camera between those 2 characters in my scene. So once you start using the unified camera inside Harmony, it really does open up tremendous visual and storytelling potential.